Hello. Thanks for taking a moment to listen. If you are interested in long-form accounts that do not usually make it into official reports, consider subscribing or leaving a comment. It helps these records stay available. What you are about to hear was not classified, but it was buried, not erased, just set aside, mislabeled, and allowed to fade through administrative delay and quiet agreement. I am sharing it now because the conditions that required silence are no longer holding. This is not a story. It is a statement. I will be speaking carefully, in order, and without speculation. When I pause, it is because I am remembering the correct sequence. This is the point where the record begins. My name is Larry Hopkins. I'm a highway patrol officer assigned to rural Grant County, Oregon. I have served 21 years in uniform, 18 of those in this jurisdiction. I am making this confession because the route no longer behaves the way it is supposed to, and because the last person who tried to correct the record is missing. This statement is being recorded off-duty, in my own vehicle, with the engine off. Grant County is larger than most people expect. Pine, scrub, long stretches of two-lane highway, with no shoulders and no lights. When weather rolls in, it does not announce itself. It just removes things. Cell coverage, visibility, options. We patrol long distances between calls. We learn our roads by feel. The grade of a curve, the smell of wet juniper, the way your headlights flatten when you crest certain hills. Isolation is not an emergency condition here. It is the default. My assignment covers State Route 395, north of Mount Vernon, including the spur roads that feed into private timber and seasonal ranch access. There are rules for that stretch, not written ones, past ones. You learn them through repetition and through what happens when someone does not listen. The first rule is simple. You do not turn around unless dispatch tells you to. The second rule is you log every mile marker verbally, even if no one responds. The third rule is you do not acknowledge pedestrians after sunset unless they are within a marked turnout. That one is the hardest. It conflicts with everything you are trained to do. The first time I heard about the houses was in 2016. It was logged as a navigation error. A tourist couple from Idaho reported passing the same farmhouse 3 times while traveling north. White siding, collapsing barn, no address marker. They were shaken, but unharmed. The report was closed. The second time was 2 months later. A local school bus driver named Ellen Carver reported the same structure appearing out of sequence during her morning route. She thought she was tired. She retired early that year. I did not connect these at the time. I want to be clear about the loss that anchors this. Deputy Marker Listen, year 2018, mile marker 114, northbound shoulder. Mark was 14 years on, married, 2 kids. He stopped for a figure standing near the tree line. After dark, that figure was calling his name. Mark broke the third rule. He exited his vehicle. He was found the next morning, 50 yards off the roadway. No trauma consistent with impact. No blood. His radio was still keyed open. The recording captured him saying, "I see it too now. Case remains unsolved." On the night this account properly begins, I was working swing shift. Late October. Rain had been steady since mid-afternoon. Dispatch traffic was light. Logging trucks were grounded due to mud. I was running northbound patrol at reduced speed. Mile marker 109. I called it out. No response. That was normal. Our dispatch covers 3 counties. After hours, silence does not mean no one is listening. At mile marker 112, my headlights picked up a porch light where there should not have been one. Not bright, not welcoming, just present. A square of yellow, through trees that were too close to the road. I slowed. The structure came into view. White siding. Collapsing barn. No address marker. I felt the immediate urge to confirm my position. I checked my odometer. I checked the map display. Everything aligned. I logged the marker. No response. I did not stop. That was the rule. You do not stop. For structures that do not appear on the county register. That is another rule. I passed the house. 2 miles later, I passed it again. This is where people assume panic. There was none. Confusion. Yes. The professional kind. The kind where you start eliminating variables. I checked my review. No turnouts. No intersections. I keyed the MIC and said, "Dispatch, this is 312. Confirm my last marker." There was static. Then a voice. That was not my dispatcher. Said, "You are where you always are, Larry." I did not respond. Names are another issue. We are instructed not to engage with unverified use of personal identifiers over open channel. I logged the next marker. It came up 114. That was wrong. The house appeared again. On my right. Porch light on. Door open. There was a figure on the porch. Female. Middle-aged. Hair pulled back. She was holding something. A jacket. She stepped down and raised her hand. I felt the pull then. The training. The human part. I rolled down my window. 2 inches. Rain came in. She said, "Officer, can you help me? My son is lost." She used my last name correctly. She pronounced it the way my mother does. I did not exit the vehicle. I asked her to step back into the light. She did not. I asked her where she was located. She said, "You know where this is. You passed it already." That phrasing matters. I closed the window. I drove on. The radio came alive then. Not dispatch. Other units. Voices overlapping. Asking if anyone else was seeing the same house. One officer was laughing. Another was angry. Someone mentioned Ellen Carver. Someone said, "Mark Allison should have listened." Then the channel went dead. I pulled into a marked turnout at mile marker 116. That turnout should have been there. It was not. The ground was soft. My tires sank. I stopped anyway. I needed to reset. That is allowed. Engine running. Doors closed. I documented the anomaly in my log. Structure repeating. Mile markers inconsistent. Unauthorized radio traffic. I did not mention the woman. That omission matters later. While I sat, headlights appeared behind me. No siren. No overheads. A county unit. I recognized the silhouette. Deputy Susan Hale. She pulled alongside. Windows down. Rain between us. She asked if I was okay. I said yes. She said, "Good." Then she said, "Do not go back." I asked her what she meant. She looked past me, down the road I had come from. She said, "It knows your vehicle now." Susan Hale disappeared. 6 weeks later, during a welfare check, on a ranch, off County Road 12, her unit was found running. Door open. No sign of struggle. No footprints beyond her own. That night, after Susan left, the turnout was gone. The ground was level again. My tires were clean. I drove south. I did not see the house again until the following week. That was a mistake. Thinking time mattered. There are procedures for recurring anomalies. They involve documentation, route reassignment, and administrative review. Those procedures assume the anomaly is static. This was not. It learned. It adjusted to our patrol patterns. It used our reports to refine itself. When we logged mile markers, it placed the house between them. When we avoided it, it appeared closer to town. By the end of October, 3 civilians were missing. All last seen near State Route 395. All had responded to someone calling for help. One was a volunteer EMT named Rachel Kim. Year 2019. She stopped for a reported stranded motorist. Her pager was found. On the shoulder, the last transmission she made was a request for backup to an address that does not exist. The rule about pedestrians after sunset was updated then, not officially, verbally. You do not acknowledge voices. You do not roll down your window. You do not answer to your name. If a structure appears out of sequence, you continue forward until the terrain changes. That is the limitation. It cannot follow over open water. Culverts count. Bridges count. If you reach a crossing, you keep moving. I'm telling you this because I broke another rule. 2 nights later, my daughter lives in John Day. She was late getting home. Her phone went to voicemail. Dispatch was overloaded. I took Route 395 north to check the turnoffs. The house was there. Porch light on. The woman was gone. A teenage girl stood at the edge of the road. Same jacket, same height as my daughter. She said, "Dad." I slowed. I did not stop. I said her name. That was enough. The road shifted. The markers repeated. The house appeared, ahead and behind. I drove until the fuel light came on. I crossed the creek. At Canyon Bridge, the image collapsed. The road returned. My daughter was safe at home. She does not remember calling me. This part of the record ends here. What follows after this point involves administrative decisions, reassignment, and the false belief that containment had been achieved. It had not. After the Canyon Bridge incident, I filed an amended report. Not the full truth. Enough to trigger review. I cited disorientation, repeated landmarks, unauthorized radio interference. I did not mention my daughter. I did not mention the voice. I learned quickly that omission does not erase consequence. It just delays. Who pays for it? Administrative response came 3 days later. Not from Salem, from our regional office. In Bend, Captain Howard Mills drove out himself. He had been highway patrol longer than me. He did not bring a recorder. He did not bring forms. We sat in the substation break room, the heater rattling. He asked me to walk him through the route, mile by mile. When I reached the house, he stopped me. He said, "We do not call it a house." That was the first confirmation that this was not isolated. He told me there were 7 similar sites across the state, always rural, always along routes, patrolled by a small number of officers, always exploiting the same pattern, a structure, a request, a familiar voice. He did not explain how long it had been happening. He said duration was not useful. Mills gave me a laminated card. No header, no seal, just bullet points. He told me to memorize it and then destroy it. I still have it. The rules had changed or clarified. Rule 1. Do not allow yourself to be stationary within visual range once the structure manifests. Rule 2. Do not communicate using personal identifiers. Rule 3. If you hear a voice you recognize, increase speed and do not respond. Rule 4. If the structure appears more than twice in a single patrol, abandon the route and cross running water. Rule 5. Never bring a civilian back to the site, even for identification. Rule 6 was new. If another officer violates a rule, you do not attempt retrieval. You log the last known position and disengage. That one caused the room to go quiet. I asked Mills how many officers we had lost. He said the number was not stable. I asked what he meant. He said sometimes the paperwork changes after the fact. The county sheriff was not included in this briefing. Neither was dispatch. This was highway patrol only. Jurisdiction mattered less than exposure. Mills reassigned me temporarily to southern routes. I was told this was for my own safety. I was also told to be available When something like this escalates, experience becomes a liability. You recognize patterns. The thing recognizes you back. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. No house, no radio anomalies, no missing persons tied to the route. That was the false stabilization. Reports came back clean. Mills sent an email stating conditions appeared improved. I printed it. I still have that too. Improvement is a dangerous word. The first crack came from outside our department. A utility worker named Tom Reyes disappeared while inspecting a downed line near mile marker 111. That marker does not officially exist. It is between 110 and 112. We avoid it. In reports, Tom was married. One child. He radioed his supervisor about a structure he did not recognize. He said someone was asking for help inside. His truck was found, parked properly, cones placed, work lights on, no sign of panic. I was brought back onto the route that night. Not officially. Mills called my personal phone. He said he needed someone who had already heard it speak. That is how it was framed. Not if. When. We staged at the southern boundary. 2 units. Mine and Susan Hale's replacement. Deputy Aaron Fitch. Aaron was new to the county. 8 months in. Still believed procedures could fix things. He had read the card. He asked questions. That worried me more than fear would have. We rolled north together. Separate lanes. Radio check. Every 5 minutes. At mile marker 110. The temperature dropped. That happens sometimes. Near the creek. At 111. The headlights dimmed. Electrical anomaly. Logged. At 112. The structure appeared. No porch light this time. Windows dark. Door closed. Barn intact. Aaron keyed up and said, "That thing looks better than the pictures." I told him not to describe it. Description reinforces attention. That is not superstition. That is observation. He acknowledged. We passed it. At 114. We passed it again. Same orientation. Same distance. From the road. It was closer now. The trees had thinned. A voice came over the radio. Dispatch tone. Incorrect cadence. It said, "Units on 395. We have a report of a child on the roadway. Mile marker 113. Please advise." Aaron slowed. I told him negative. Do not respond. He said, "That is our duty." I said, "Our duty is containment." He said, "That is a kid." The figure appeared between our vehicles. Small, hooded, standing exactly on the center line. I could not see the face. I could see the shoes. They were Aaron's son's shoes. He had shown me pictures. Earlier that week, I accelerated. I crossed the creek without signaling. The radio went dead. In the mirror, I saw Aaron brake. We found his unit. The next morning, engine off, lights on, door open, no body. His log ended with a word. "Sorry, that is not an approved entry." After that, the rules tightened. We were instructed to carry pre-recorded messages. If the entity spoke, we were to respond only with standardized phrases. No names, no questions, just instructions to step away. It did not work. It began to mimic the recordings perfectly, even the background noise. Civilian exposure increased. The house began appearing closer to town, near gas stations, near driveways, always just out of jurisdiction for someone else. The sheriff finally noticed. He called a meeting. Mills did not attend. He sent a memo stating Highway Patrol would handle route anomalies. The sheriff did not accept that. He sent deputies anyway. 2 of them never came back. Family pressure mounted. My wife noticed. I was taking longer routes home, avoiding bridges, avoiding certain words. She asked if I was having an affair. That would have been easier to explain. I told her There were things I could not discuss. She said that was not good enough. She was right. The entity adapted to that too. It began using my wife's voice, not on the road, at home. Phone calls that dropped before I could answer. Voicemails with no audio. Our landline rang at 3 in the morning. When I picked up, there was breathing, then my name. I unplugged the phone. It rang anyway. The limitation held. It could not cross. Running water. It could not follow. Into town. Past the river. That is why it stayed. On the highway. That is why it wanted us. To bring people to it. We were the bridge. Mills called for a containment operation. Not a stop. A delay. Barricades. Detours. Increased patrol presence. We closed sections of 395. At night, the house appeared on alternate routes, on private roads, on driveways, where it had no right to be. The more we restricted, the more it spread. Systemic failure does not announce itself. It just becomes normal. The next loss was personal. My brother-in-law, Kevin Moore, year 2020. He was driving back from Pendleton, took 395 to avoid weather. He called me from the road, said he was lost, said he kept seeing the same place. I told him to keep driving. I told him not to stop. He said someone was waving. He said it looked like my daughter. I shouted. The call dropped. His car was found at Canyon Bridge. Engine cold. No sign of him. I broke the rules then, all of them. I went back. I parked near the structure. I shouted names. It answered. It used everyone. My daughter. My wife. Mark Ellison. Susan Hale. Aaron Fitch. Kevin. It told me. They were inside. Waiting. It told me. Rules were lies. That stopping would end it. I did not go in. Not because of strength. Because I could see the waterline behind the house. A culvert. Flowing. It could not cross. It could not bring them out. That is the truth. It could not change. This part ends with a containment order being lifted quietly, without resolution. The route reopened. The reports stopped mentioning anomalies. The house remained. The reopening of State Route 395 was framed as a resource decision. Winter was coming. Day tours were costly. Mills sent a final directive stating that the anomaly had stabilized and that continued focus risked unnecessary exposure. That phrase was used twice. Unnecessary exposure. It did not specify. Exposure to what? Patrol schedules. Return to normal. New officers were rotated through the route without full briefing. That was intentional. The card was not redistributed. Institutional memory is selective. It favors liability reduction over survival. I remained assigned to the southern section, but was told to remain on call. That is how they keep you close, without admitting they still need you. The first sign that stabilization was false came quietly. No missing persons, no radio anomalies, just a change in how the road felt. The curves tightened, the shoulders narrowed, mile markers leaned at angles they had not before. These are subjective indicators, hard to log, hard to argue, but anyone who has driven the same stretch for decades knows when it stops, agreeing with itself. I started carrying a handheld recorder, not for evidence, for grounding. When the environment begins to shift, you anchor yourself with sound, your own voice, stating facts, time, location, weather. I recorded everything. I did not tell anyone. That secrecy became another rule. On November 12th, year 2020, I was dispatched to assist a stranded motorist near mile marker 115. The call came through standard channels. No distortion. No misuse. Of my name. That should have been reassuring. It was not. The caller was a young woman named Ashley Turner. Vehicle breakdown. Hazard lights on. She was calm. She had called AAA first. They told her the location did not exist. That is when she called us. I acknowledged and proceeded. I reminded myself of the rules. No stopping within visual range. No personal identifiers. Cross water. If repeated, the shoulder was narrow. The terrain sloped down to scrub and rock. As I approached, I saw the vehicle, late model sedan, parked properly, hazards flashing, no structure visible. That mattered. The entity had learned patience. Ashley stood by the guardrail. She waved. She did not step into the road. She did everything right. That is how it works. It does not force violations. It creates conditions where compliance feels safe. I pulled ahead of her vehicle, not beside it. I stayed in my unit. Window down. 2 inches. Rain again. Always rain. When it wants attention, I asked her to remain where she was. She said okay. She asked if she could use my phone. Her battery was low. I said no. I told her help was coming. That was a lie. Dispatch was already stretched. I logged the mile marker verbally. 1:15. No response. Behind her, between the trees, the structure emerged. No sound. No shift. Just present. White siding. Barn intact. Porch light on. Ashley did not turn. She could not see it from where she stood. That is another tactic. It reveals itself selectively. I felt the pressure then. The ethical weight. She was real. Documented. Her voice matched her name. If I left, she would be alone. If I stayed, the rules would tighten around both of us. I told her to walk south with me to the creek. She asked why. I said safety. She hesitated. That hesitation cost time. The porch light flickered. The door opened. A man stepped out. Middle-aged. Work jacket. He called Ashley by name. He said he was a mechanic. He said he had a phone. He did not look at me. That was deliberate. The entity often delegates. It creates intermediaries. You want to believe those are separate. They are not. Ashley took a step toward him. I raised my voice. I told her to stop. She looked back at me, confused. I could see the calculation. Authority versus convenience. Trust is a finite resource. The man said, "Officer, I can take it from here." He used the correct tone, the correct posture. He held up a phone. It was ringing. The ringtone was Ashley's. She froze. I broke protocol. I exited my vehicle. I closed the distance. I placed myself between Ashley and the structure. I told her to walk with me. I did not look at the man. Looking reinforces engagement. I felt him move closer. Anyway, I smelled oil and damp wood. I did not turn. We reached the creek. Shallow, but moving. I told Ashley to cross. She asked if it was safe. I said yes. She stepped in. The man stopped at the bank. He did not follow. He smiled. That expression was not human. It was an approximation. The porch light went out. The structure receded. Ashley crossed. I followed. The pressure lifted. Not gone. Reduced. Ashley was picked up by county. She filed a complaint. She said I had endangered her by making her cross water at night. The complaint was upheld. I received a written reprimand. That is the cost of containment. You look wrong. The thing looks reasonable. After that, the entity adjusted again. It stopped manifesting as a house exclusively. Sometimes it was a shed. Sometimes a mobile home. Sometimes nothing at all. Just voices. just radio traffic. It learned our documentation thresholds. It stayed below them. Secondary consequences began to accumulate. Increased accidents. Single vehicle. No clear cause. Drivers reported confusion. Repetition. Fatigue. None mentioned a structure that mattered. It was expanding influence. Without direct contact, Mills called another meeting. Smaller this time. Closed door. He admitted the stabilization had been misjudged. He said the thing responded to pressure by dispersing. He said we needed to reduce engagement. That meant fewer patrols, less logging, more silence. I asked how that helped. He said it feeds on our response patterns. Starve it. I asked what happens to civilians. He said we cannot save everyone. That was when I realized the rules were not just about survival. They were about allocation. Who we choose to protect. Who we allow to be consumed. To preserve the largest system. That is not written anywhere. It is understood. The next loss was my wife. Not physically. Not yet. She began to change. She would ask about my roots. About bridges. About water. She would repeat questions. She would forget answers. One night, she stood at the window and said she could see a light in the trees. We do not have trees that close. I told her it was reflection. She nodded. She did not move. The entity had found a way around its limitation, not by crossing water, by bringing the water to us. Flood season came early. Creeks swelled. Culverts overflowed. Roads closed. Detours rerouted traffic. Onto higher ground. Onto the highway. I was dispatched to manage a closure near Canyon Bridge. The water was high. Debris moving fast. I set cones. I logged markers. I felt watched. Across the water. On the far bank. The structure stood. It should not have been visible. The curve blocks that view. It stood anyway. The porch light was on. The door was open. Figures moved inside. Not distinct. Not separate. The radio crackled. A voice said, "Larry, you can come get them now. The water is almost gone." That was a lie. The water was rising. But the pressure was there. The promise. If I crossed. If I broke. The last rule. Maybe it would end. Maybe containment would shift to resolution. That is how it tempts you. With closure, I stayed. I watched the water rise. I logged the closure. A truck approached. A family inside. They wanted to cross. I told them no. They yelled. They threatened to report me. I held the line. The water took the bridge. An hour later, the structure vanished. The family survived. They never knew how close they came. This part ends with the realization that the entity does not need us to stop. It needs us to choose. Every rule is a decision point. Every decision costs someone. That is how it expands. Not by force, by function. After the Canyon Bridge closure, the county issued a public notice citing seasonal flooding, an infrastructure assessment. No mention of anomalous visibility. No mention of why the bridge failed earlier than projected. The structure was absent from all satellite review. That absence was used as evidence that the threat had receded. Absence is not proof. It is opportunity. I was removed from field duty. 2 days later, administrative leave. Not disciplinary. Not medical. They called it decompression. Mills told me it was temporary. He said my judgment was still sound, but my proximity to the route created risk. He did not specify risk to whom. I stayed home. That was worse. When you are not moving, the rules do not apply cleanly. There is no mileage to log, no water to cross. The thing does not need roads. When you stop driving them, it adapts to stillness differently. My wife began sleepwalking. That is what the doctor called it. She would stand in the hallway, facing the front door. She would whisper names, not ours, names I recognized from reports. Ellison, Hale, Fitch, Turner. She never opened the door. She never reached for the handle. That restraint mattered. It meant something was still incomplete. I reported this to Mills. He told me to document privately and not escalate. He said, involving medical channels, created records that could be misinterpreted. He said, the thing exploited institutional transparency. That was the phrase. Institutional transparency. Silence became another containment tool. False stabilization. Returned in January. No new disappearances. Accident rates normalized. Complaints dropped. The house was not reported by civilians for 6 consecutive weeks. A memo circulated stating the anomaly appeared dormant. That memo was forwarded to Salem. That is how you create precedent. You let paperwork outlive the threat. During that period, new construction began along Route 395. A rest area expansion, improved lighting, better signage. On paper, this should have reduced risk. In practice, it gave the entity new surfaces, new fixtures, new ways to anchor itself without appearing out of place. The first high-impact incident after dormancy involved a school bus. Morning route, snow on the ground, visibility low. The driver, a man named Carl Jennings, reported seeing an illuminated structure near the rest area turnout. He assumed it was part of the construction. He slowed. The bus did not stop. That saved the children. Carl did. He pulled over after dropping them off and went back to check. He was found later inside the rest area bathroom, alive, unresponsive. He had carved mile markers into his arm, one after another. No repetition. He survived, but never spoke again. That incident forced a review. Mills convened a task group, not official, no minutes, just experienced personnel. We met in a maintenance building. After hours, the rules were laid out again, revised, expanded, some contradicted earlier versions. That was intentional. The entity had begun using our certainty against us. Conflicting rules create hesitation. Hesitation creates openings. One rule was removed entirely. Do not bring civilians back to the site. That rule had caused harm when followed correctly. Too many people had been left alone. Too many had gone back without us. The new guidance was situational discretion. That is bureaucratic language for moral burden. You decide who risks exposure and when. I returned to limited field duty, under supervision, ride along only, observational. My presence was considered a stabilizing factor. The thing remembered me. It adjusted when I was nay. That was the theory. In reality, it wanted me closer. The next escalation came through infrastructure, power outages along the route, not widespread, selective, always just enough to create darkness. Near the manifestation points, utility crews were dispatched. One of them was Tom Reyes' replacement. He called in, reporting interference. On his radio, voices overlapping. He said someone was guiding him to the breaker. He followed. He did not return. We began using physical markers, paint on rocks, chalk on asphalt, things that would not show up on official maps. The entity began replicating them imperfectly, always one detail wrong, the wrong color, the wrong spacing. That was how we identified its work. That was also how it learned our methods. My daughter was followed home from work. One night, she noticed a vehicle behind her, matching turns, no plates, headlights dim. She called me. I told her to keep driving, to cross the river. She did. The vehicle stopped at the bridge. She said she could see a light behind it, a porch light on the far bank. That should not have been possible. The river was between them. That is when I understood the limitation was eroding, not gone. Negotiated. The entity began using reflections. Water does not have to be crossed if it can be mirrored. Puddles, wet asphalt, windshields. The rules did not account for that. We adapted. We issued guidance to avoid reflective surfaces. At night, that is impossible. Roads are reflective by nature. Again, the burden shifted. Another loss followed. Deputy Carla Nguyen, year 2021. She responded to a noise complaint near the rest area. She heard voices inside the closed facility. She followed protocol, announced presence. No response. She entered. The cameras recorded her walking in circles, the same hallway, over and over. The footage loops. Timestamp unchanged. She is still listed as missing. Her badge was found near sink. Wet. The psychological toll became visible. Officers avoided the route. Sick leave increased. Transfers requested. Mills denied most of them. Experience was containment. Burnout was acceptable. That is not cruelty. That is calculation. I began to hear the voices, even when not on duty. At grocery stores, at stoplights. Always my name. Always followed by a request. Help. Wait. Come back. I stopped responding. That was another rule. Silence starves it. Silence also isolates you from everyone else. My wife asked for separation. She said she could not live with someone who was always listening to something she could not hear. She moved in with her sister. The house felt empty. That is when the porch light appeared across the street. No structure, just the light, suspended, watching. I did not report that. I could not prove it. Proof is required for action. Action is what it wants. The next set piece occurred during a controlled burn. Forest Service coordination. Multiple agencies. Radios congested. Smoke reduced visibility. The perfect environment. The structure manifested as a fire lookout. Legitimate. Documented. Except it was not on the map. A crew diverted to it. They thought it was shelter. Only one came back. He said the inside was bigger than the outside. He said the stairs went down instead of up. He said there was water at the bottom, but no exit. We shut down the burn. Officially, due to wind. Unofficially, due to loss. That loss was written off as an accident. That is how systemic failure hides. Each incident has a plausible explanation. Together, they form a pattern no one wants to see. This part ends with Mills calling me. At home, he said, Salem wanted answers. He said they were asking why containment was failing. He asked if I still believed the rules mattered. I told him yes. I told him they were all we had. He said that might not be enough anymore. Salem's involvement changed the texture of everything. When oversight arrives late, it does not look for truth. It looks for leverage. Mills warned me before the first call. He said to answer only what was asked. He said to avoid metaphor. He said to keep the language procedural. That is difficult when the procedure is the problem. The call included representatives from transportation, emergency management, and something listed only as risk analysis. No law enforcement titles. No names. I recognized. They asked about incident frequency, geographic spread, resource strain. They did not ask about voices. They did not ask about the structure. That omission was deliberate. They were already operating under assumptions. They would not state. A directive followed. Within the week, Route 395 would remain open. Patrol presence would be reduced. Incident reporting thresholds would be raised. This was framed as normalization. The theory was that attention reinforced manifestation. The solution was to behave as if nothing was wrong. That theory ignored the cost already paid. We were instructed to cease informal rule sharing. No more verbal warnings. No more cards. Official guidance only. That guidance omitted the water limitation. It omitted name usage. It omitted everything that could not be justified in a public document. What remained was generic officer safety language, situational awareness, avoid unnecessary stops, report anomalies through standard channels. Standard channels filtered everything out. I continued recording privately. The handheld recorder became constant, even at home, especially at home. My wife had moved out, but her presence lingered. Not emotionally, functionally. The entity used her routines. Her coffee mug appeared on the counter, still warm. I did not drink it. That was a rule I made myself. Do not consume anything that appears without explanation. The voices became more coordinated. They stopped overlapping. They cued, one at a time. Calm, reasonable. They stopped asking for help and started offering it. They said they could end it. They said they could give people back. All I had to do was formalize contact. That phrase matters. Formalize. As if this were a negotiation requiring recognition. The next high-impact event was unavoidable. A multi-vehicle collision during a snowstorm. Chain restrictions in effect. Visibility near zero. Dispatch overwhelmed. Units staged where they could. I was assigned traffic control near mile marker 113. That number again. I did not comment on it. Numbers only have power if you let them. As flares burned down, headlights appeared through the snow. A sedan approached from the closed direction. I waved it off. The driver did not slow. I stepped into the lane. He stopped inches from me. Window down. He said he had to get home. He said his wife was in labor. He said the D2 took him past a place that kept moving. He said someone told him to follow the lights. Behind him, through the snow, the structure manifested. Not a house. A hospital entrance. Automatic doors. Red Cross symbol. Everything correct. Except the scale. Too large. Too close. Too many lights. The entity was escalating presentation. Offering solutions tailored to need. I told the driver to turn around. He refused. He said he could see the doors. He said he could hear people inside. He said they were calling his name. I grabbed his sleeve. Physical contact is discouraged. It grounds both parties. It also transfers attention. The doors slid open. I had to choose. Hold him. Let traffic back up. Risk more collisions. Or let him go. The rules did not cover this. They never do. When it matters, I let him go. He accelerated into the snow. The hospital vanished. The road ended in trees. He did not survive. His wife did. The baby did. That is how the math works. An internal review followed. I was cleared of fault. Weather, driver decision. No mention of doors. No mention of lights. I listened to the recording later. My voice was steady. That is what scared me. There was no hesitation. No emotion. That is erosion. After that, the entity stopped disguising itself. as benevolent infrastructure. It no longer needed to. It had learned our thresholds. It stayed just plausible enough to pass initial scrutiny, just wrong enough to draw attention. The porch light returned. Always the porch light. That constant became a problem. Patterns invite study. Study invites challenge. Mills proposed a change. Not containment. Not avoidance. Disruption. He wanted to alter the environment. Remove the things it anchored to. Lights. Structures. Signage. A controlled stripping of features along the route. It was extreme. It required coordination. It required buy-in. It was approved quietly, under the guise of maintenance. They removed reflective markers. They dimmed rest area lights. They closed turnouts. They demolished an abandoned farmhouse that matched the manifestation profile. For 2 weeks, activity dropped. Silence returned. That was the second false stabilization. It felt earned. That was the mistake. The entity responded by moving inward. It began manifesting inside vehicles, reflections in dashboards, voices from back seats. The road was no longer required. Patrol units reported passengers that were not there. Cameras showed nothing. Officers stopped driving alone. That reduced coverage further. My wife called me then. First time in months. She said she was hearing me call her name. She said she knew it was not real, but it sounded right. She asked what to do. I told her to go to her sister's house. I told her not to drive near water. I told her not to answer. She said she was already there. She said the porch light across the street was on. There was no house, just the light. I drove. That was another rule violation. Personal response. Emotional attachment. I crossed bridges without logging. I ignored dispatch. When I arrived, the street was dark. No light. Her sister's house was intact. My wife was not there. Her phone was found on the sidewalk. The last message on it was from me, sent while I was driving. I did not send it. Search efforts were brief. Adults disappear. It happens. There was no sign of struggle, no witnesses. The case went cold. In hours, I did not attend the meeting. Mills came to me. He did not offer condolences. He asked if I was still functional. That is the language. Functional. The entity used her voice. After that, more than any other, it used it to undermine rules, to suggest exceptions, to argue. That containment was cruelty. That letting people go was mercy. It framed itself as inevitable and therefore justified. That is the oldest argument. I stopped sleeping. When I did, I dreamed of mile markers, counting down, never repeating, always approaching zero. I began to forget dates, names, faces. That scared me more than the voices. Memory is structure. Losing it gives the thing room. Another officer broke. He stopped his unit in the lane and walked toward the light. He removed his badge first, placed it carefully. That detail haunts me. He was found days later, downstream, waterlogged. The light was gone. Salem issued another directive. Full normalization. No special handling. The route would be treated like any other. Resources reallocated. The anomaly reclassified as resolved. That word again. Resolved does not mean ended. It means no longer addressed. Mills resigned. Early retirement. He left me his copy of the card. He said it did not matter anymore. I told him it still did. He said rules only work if someone enforces them. He said enforcement requires authority. Authority had moved on. This part ends with me alone, on the route again, voluntarily. No orders, No backup. The porch light ahead. The water behind. The choice narrowing. I returned to Route 395. Without clearance. Not officially. I logged in as available. And drove north. Dispatch acknowledged. Without comment. That happens when a system has already decided not to see you. Authority exists until it becomes inconvenient. Driving alone again felt different, not quieter, more focused. The road no longer tested me with repetition. It tested me with absence. Mile markers were intact, curves aligned. The environment behaved. That is how it draws you in, by offering relief. I spoke aloud as I drove. Time, location, weather, my name, my title, 21 years, Grant County. The recorder captured everything. I did not listen back. Listening creates distance. I needed proximity. At mile marker 112, the radio came on. Not a voice, just open channel, static shaped, like breathing. I closed it. That was a rule. Do not leave channels open. The static continued anyway. From the back seat. I did not look. Mirrors lie when you need them most. I acknowledged the presence. Without engagement. That matters. Recognition. Without response. It does not like that. It prefers denial. Or surrender. Neutrality. Frustrates it. The first structure appeared. As a maintenance shed. New. County issue. I knew. Because I had signed off. On similar ones. Years earlier. This one was wrong. The lock was on the inside. The warning placards were outdated. I passed. Without slowing. It did not repeat. That was new. It was testing. Different hooks. Further north. I encountered a stalled vehicle. No hazards. No driver visible. Hood up. Steam rising. This was textbook. I slowed, but did not stop. I keyed the MIC and announced presence. No response. I logged the mile marker. 117. The number came back at me. Reversed. 711. That is a call code. Not ours. It meant nothing. And everything. As I passed, the driver stepped into the road. Older man. Gray jacket. He raised his hands. He said, my wife's name. He said, she was cold. He said, she was waiting. Just off the shoulder. I accelerated. The road dipped. Water crossed. Shallow. Enough. The man vanished. The car was gone. Steam lingered. That detail matters. Residue. Without source. I pulled into a turnout. That did exist. Gravel. Signage intact. I stopped. That was allowed. Engine running. Doors locked. I needed to test something. I opened the window and spoke directly. I said, I know what you are doing. I said, you exploit duty. I said, you use compassion as leverage. I said, rules exist to contain you, not to save us. I said, you cannot cross water. I said, you cannot act without invitation. The air changed. Pressure, like altitude shift. The porch light appeared. Across the road. No structure, just the light. It flickered. In response to my words. That was confirmation. It listens. It understands. It adapts. A voice answered. Not my wife. Not anyone I knew. Neutral. Professional. It said, Larry Hopkins. Highway Patrol Officer. Grant County, Oregon. It said, your rules are inefficient. It said, your containment fails because it relies on scarcity. It said, we offer abundance. That language matters. It reframes consumption as generosity. I did not respond. Silence again. The light dimmed. Not gone. Waiting. I drove on. The next incident involved a family. Minivan. Out-of-state plates. Pulled over voluntarily. At a closed rest area. The gates were locked. They had climbed around them. That was their first violation. The second was following a sign. That should not have been there. Handwritten. D2 arrow. Reflective paint. We had not placed it. I approached slowly. The parents were calm. Too calm. The children were asleep. That was wrong. Middle of the day. Noise everywhere. I asked why they stopped. The father said they needed to use the bathroom. He gestured toward the rest area building. The lights were on inside. They should not have been. Power was cut months ago. I told them the facility was closed. The mother said someone inside told them it was open. She said he sounded official. She said he used their last name. I felt the pull again. Not emotional. Procedural. The instinct. To correct. To escort. To fix. I chose differently. I told them to leave. Immediately. I did not explain. Explanation invites debate. Debate invites delay. Delay is invitation. The father hesitated. The mother asked if there was some way else. I pointed south. I said, 10 miles. I said, follow me. We drove. I watched their mirrors. I watched the road. I watched the reflections. The rest area receded. The lights went out. At the creek crossing, the children woke up. They cried. That was good. Awareness returned. I escorted them to town. I did not file a report. That omission mattered. It meant the incident did not exist. It also meant no one else learned from it. That is the trade. The entity escalated. That night, not with manifestation, with administration, a memo went out, suspending my access to patrol systems, an authorized activity, liability exposure. I was ordered to surrender my vehicle. I did not. I parked it at a friend's property and took a county truck. That was theft. I accept that. I drove without lights, without radio, just the recorder. The road felt narrower. Trees leaned in, not physically, perceptually. The environment compresses when options reduce. At mile marker 114, I saw them. Not figures, not voices. Data. Mile markers repeating. Ahead. Out of sequence. 114. 114. 114. The same sign. Over and over. The road between them. Identical. This was a trap. Forward motion. Without progress. The thing had learned to remove escalation cues. No house. No light. Just repetition. I stopped. That was dangerous. But motion was meaningless. I needed a reset. I got out. The air was still. No wind. No insects. Silence is pressure. I walked to the sign. I touched it. Cold. Real. Physical. Behind me. Footsteps. I did not turn. The voice spoke calmly. It said, "You are inefficient." It said, "Your rules cost lives." It said, "We offer certainty." It said, "If you formalize contact, we will consolidate. Fewer sites. Fewer losses." It said, my wife would return. This was the choice. It had been building toward. Not surrender. Partnership. Containment. Through cooperation. That is how institutions fall. Not through collapse. Through agreement. I turned then. Slowly. The figure was indistinct. Not wrong. Just unfinished. It held something. A badge. My badge. Taken earlier. I had not noticed. That mattered. It could access me. Without my awareness. I said no. Not loudly. Not defiantly. Just no. The word landed. The environment reacted. The mile markers shifted. The road tilted. Water sound increased. The creek was neigh. I backed away. The figure followed. Until the waterline. It stopped. Its outline blurred. It said, "This is inefficient." It said, "You will fail alone." I crossed. The repetition broke. The road resumed. I collapsed. On the shoulder. Exhaustion is not weakness. It is a resource depletion. I had nothing left to bargain with. By morning, my access was fully revoked. Badge deactivated. Vehicle flagged. I was no longer an officer in any system. That mattered. Authority removed. That was the final erosion. The rules still existed. I no longer had the power to enforce them. I went home. The porch light across the street was on. No structure, just the light. It stayed on all day. This part ends with me understanding that survival does not require authority. Containment does. And containment, without authority, becomes trespass. Losing authority does not end obligation. It clarifies it. When you are no longer protected by role, every action becomes personal. That is when the rules test you hardest. I stopped wearing the uniform, not symbolically, practically. It drew attention. Attention feeds patterns. I wore neutral clothing. I drove borrowed vehicles. I avoided schedules. Predictability is an invitation without access to official channels. I relied on what leaked through. Scanner chatter, social media posts about strange lights, community boards asking if anyone else had driven past the same place twice. Those posts were taken down quickly. Moderators cited misinformation. That word again. Misinformation does not mean false. It means disruptive. The entity adjusted to my removal. It did not pursue me directly. That would have been inefficient. It shifted focus to the gaps. New officers, temporary workers, civilians, with just enough authority to be trusted and just enough compassion to be exploited. School crossing guards, roadside assistance drivers, volunteers search and rescue. The perimeter widened. I kept my own map, hand-drawn, no digital trace. I marked incidents by date and sensory detail, light intensity, voice clarity, emotional content. Over time, a pattern emerged. The manifestations clustered around decision points, intersections, detours, transitional spaces, places where humans hesitate. That is its limitation. It cannot act without choice. It requires a decision. It engineers conditions. It cannot force the outcome. That is why rules matter. They constrain choice. I began intercepting quietly. When I heard about a stalled vehicle near a known point, I showed up before anyone official. I did not identify myself as law enforcement. I did not give instructions. I asked questions that moved people toward water, toward town, toward certainty. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it did not. One night, it used my daughter again. Not her voice, her habits. A car matching hers, parked near turnout, door open, purse visible. That was calculated. I knew she was at work. I had confirmed. Knowledge does not erase instinct. I approached anyway. The car was empty, cold, no recent use. The purse was hers, real, contents intact. That mattered. It had acquired a physical artifact. That was escalation. It no longer relied solely on mimicry. It could relocate objects, not across water, but enough. A voice spoke from the trees. It said, "You taught us efficiency." It said, "You taught us to wait." It said, "Your rules are now ours." I did not respond. I took the purse. I walked back to my vehicle. The trees shifted. The road lengthened. I crossed the creek without looking back. When I reached town, the purse was gone. That was the exchange. It tests what you will carry. My daughter was unharmed. She had left the purse at a restaurant. Cameras confirmed. The one I found was a copy. Perfect. Except the zipper was on the wrong side. That detail keeps me awake. The community began to notice. Not the cause. The effect. Increased disappearances. Unexplained drownings. Accidents. without debris, a pattern of absence. People stopped driving. At night, businesses closed early. The highway emptied. That should have reduced incidents. It did not. The entity does not require volume. It requires vulnerability. I was contacted by someone from Salem, not official, a private number, a woman who did not give her name. She said she knew what I was doing. She said she understood the rules. She said the state was considering a different approach, relocation, abandonment, closing the route permanently, letting the area go quiet. I asked her, what happens to the people who live there? She said, relocation assistance, buyouts, voluntary. I asked, what happens when someone refuses? She did not answer. Silence is an answer. That plan would not contain it. It would spread it. Displacement creates new routes, new decision points, new jurisdictions. Without context, the thing is not tied to land. It is tied to behavior. I told her that. She said that was above her authority. She asked if I would consult. I said no. Consultation implies consent. Consent formalizes contact. After that call, the activity spiked. The entity sensed the shift. It always does. The porch light appeared in town, not attached to anything, just the light, hanging over a closed storefront. People noticed. Photos circulated, then disappeared. A curfew was proposed, not enforced. Suggested. Suggestions are easier to violate. A teenager went missing. After ignoring it, his friends said he followed a voice. They said it sounded like his mother. His mother is alive. That is another tactic. It uses people who cannot confirm. I began leaving warnings. Anonymous. Notes on windshields. Chalk symbols. Near crossings. Not instructions. Just phrases. If you hear your name, keep moving. If the road repeats, cross water. Do not stop. 4 lights. Some listened. Some laughed. Laughter is a shield until it cracks. One evening, I found a note on my own windshield. Same handwriting. Same chalk. It said, "You taught us this." It said, "Thank you." The final loss before this statement was recorded was a child, not taken, returned, found wandering near the river. No memory of how he got there. No trauma, just silence. When asked where he had been, he said, in the place with no doors. He said there were a lot of rules inside. He said breaking them made people disappear. That confirmed something I had avoided. The entity is not just predatory, it is archival. It stores, it organizes, it refines, it learns from loss. That is why resolution is impossible. Ending it would require ending the behavior it exploits. That is not achievable. I am tired. That matters. Exhaustion erodes adherence. It makes exceptions feel reasonable. That is when mistakes happen. That is why I am recording this now. I no longer patrol. I monitor. I warn when I can. I intervene when necessary. I cross water more than I should. I avoid my own name. I have accepted that I will not be believed. Belief is not required. Compliance is. The porch light is still across the street. It turns on at dusk. It turns off at dawn. No structure has appeared. Yet, it is waiting. It always waits. This part ends with me understanding that containment is no longer an institutional function. It is a personal one, passed hand to hand, voice to voice, rule to rule. And every time someone chooses compassion over procedure, it grows. I am recording this because the waiting has changed. It is no longer passive. It has begun to count on me stopping. The porch light across the street did not turn off. Last night, dawn came and went. The light stayed on. That is escalation. It means it no longer needs contrast. It is asserting permanence. I have moved out of my house, not dramatically. I packed what I could carry without thinking. Thinking slows you down. I left behind photographs, furniture, paper records, objects, anchor memory. Memory is leverage. I am staying near water, always near water. I do not sleep deeply anymore. That is intentional. The entity has stopped trying to persuade me directly. That phase ended when I refused formal contact. Now it works around me, through me. It uses my absence as proof that rules fail. It points to the losses and says, containment did not save them. It says, cooperation might have. That argument is finding traction. Salem has accelerated the relocation plan. It is no longer voluntary. Properties near the route are being condemned. Infrastructure risk statutes, flooding, landslide potential, environmental hazard, all true enough to pass review. Families are being moved quickly, poorly, without context. They are being sent to other counties, other states, new roads, new decision points. I have seen the early reports. A house that appears twice. In eastern Washington, a shed that should not be there. In northern Nevada, a rest stoplight. In Idaho, that turns on without power. The pattern is not migrating. It is seeding. This is the consequence of institutional failure. When you stop containing, you distribute. I was contacted again by the woman from Salem. She did not try to persuade me. This time, she asked me to stop interfering. She said my actions were complicating the rollout. She said people needed clarity, not superstition. I asked her how many people had to disappear before clarity mattered. She ended the call. The entity has begun using her voice, not often, not aggressively, just enough to associate resistance with obstruction. That is how narratives shift. 2 nights ago, I broke one of my own rules. I responded to a call for help. It was a roadside assistance driver, young man, 22, new job. He had pulled over to help a stranded vehicle near mile marker 118. That marker exists now. It did not before. He called a friend instead of dispatch. That friend called me. Word still travels sideways. I arrived to find the assistance truck parked properly, lights on, tools laid out, no driver. The stranded vehicle was gone. No structure visible, just the road, the trees, the quiet. I did not shout. Shouting draws focus. I walked the shoulder. I found his phone near the ditch. Screen cracked. The last message sent was a location pin to his mother. The timestamp repeated the same minute over and over. I heard him then, not his voice, my wife's. She said he was scared. She said he needed help. She said I could still fix things. That is the hardest part. To explain. The thing does not lie outright. It reframes. It uses truths to justify violations. Yes, he was scared. Yes, help might have changed the outcome, but the cost would not have been limited to him. I did not go in. There was no visible structure to enter, but the pull was there. The invitation. I crossed the creek. The voice stopped. The road normalized. The young man was not recovered. Later that night, I found a new note. On my windshield. It was written. In my handwriting. I compared it. Stroke for stroke. Perfect. It said, "You are inefficient." It said, "We are patient." That is when I understood the final limitation. It cannot act without continuity. It needs observers, participants, people who remember and respond. That is why it archives. That is why it mimics. That is why it escalates slowly. Sudden catastrophe draws scrutiny. Gradual erosion becomes policy. If this recording reaches you, it means the containment has fully failed. In this region, the root is no longer singular. The rules still apply, but they are no longer enough on their own. They must be carried. I will restate them clearly. Do not stop for structures that do not appear on official maps, even if they look correct. Do not respond to voices that use your name, especially if they sound like someone you love. Do not turn around unless instructed by verified authority. If the road repeats, do not search for explanation. Keep moving until terrain changes. Cross running water. When repetition occurs, flow matters more than depth. Do not bring civilians back to a site that feels wrong, but do not leave them without direction. Move them away from decision points. If another responder violates a rule, do not attempt retrieval. If you hear an offer of certainty, refuse it. Most importantly, understand this. Compassion without procedure is invitation. Procedure without compassion is abandonment. The balance is the only thing that slows it. I am not recording this to absolve myself. I made choices that cost lives. I followed rules that harmed people. I broke rules that harmed people. There is no clean ledger. Survival horror implies spectacle. This is not that. This is administration. Under pressure. This is triage. Without end. I do not expect belief. I expect recognition. If you hear your name on an empty road, if you pass the same place twice, if a porch light appears where nothing stands, do not stop. Do not investigate. Do not assume. You are special. It is older than you. It is patient. It has learned our systems better than we have. I am Larry Hopkins, former highway patrol officer, Grant County, Oregon. 21 years of service. I work in places where rules exist, not to prevent accidents, but to contain something that preys on human behavior. If you are hearing this, the rules are now yours. Do not waste them.